So we have 6 pieces of chocolate. We have ranged it from the cheapest to the most expensive one. We want you to taste each and give us like your opinion on what do you think of the quality for each.
First, you snap it. What does it smell like?
Chocolate.
Okay, we'll come to that. This is interesting, right? This is an industrial chocolate, right?
Got it.
Let's move on to the next one. This is very clearly a chocolate from off the shelf.
So this was Hershey's.
Junk.
Oh my gosh.
No vanilla. This might be craft chocolate. I'll get trolled for this.
Done, sir. Good? You're good to go? Chalo, let's go.
Meet Chaitanya Mupala, the founder of Manam Chocolate.
A brand that's trying to do for Indian chocolate what Swiss brands did for Europe.
They're not just making bars, they're trying to change how India is seen on the chocolate map.
You spent 15 years in the chocolate and the mithai space. Why?
We realized that anybody who's doing anything in chocolate was buying the chocolate. Most of what we were eating and are eating still happens to be compound, where you replace the most valuable thing, which is cacao butter, with a cheaper hydrogenated fat, like a vegetable oil or a palm oil. Technically, it is in chocolate. The dogs walk on it and the chickens pee on it, and that becomes your chocolate.
Why has India always been dominated by these foreign chocolate brands? Dairy Milk, Hershey's, Toblerone, Lindt, Mars. Why have we not seen like an Indian brand breaking through and becoming this global player? Why do you think all of these brands are getting into chocolate now?
It's an 18,000 crore market. Why wouldn't Amul try and take a piece of that? We have aspirations to position this as chocolate from India and encourage the world to look at it the way we look at Belgian or Swiss. We're only 0.5% of global production. Even if we quadrupled it, we'd only be 2% of global production. Where it's very unlikely that we're ever going to be a major cacao growing country, but maybe we can be a premium cacao growing country.
We are now glad to be a part of the 01 Media Network by Zerodha. Let's get into the episode. I think, Chaitanya, you spent 15 years in the chocolate and the mithai space. You've given a lot of time building sweet as a category and working in this space. Why?
I got into this space not because I wanted to. It happened. I come from a family that ran a brand called Almond House in Hyderabad, which is it used to be this small mom and pop sort of a brand that made Indian mithai. But it was a differentiated business, even in a small scale, but very traditional. I come from a traditional business, Indian mithai. Often I refer to myself as a halwai. And there at Almond House, we started trying to understand what are some strategic directions that we can take to look at mithai as a category, particularly for the micro market, because mithai tends to be very regional and very associated with singular markets like cities, etc. And we built out a strategy and we started executing that strategy and we found scale. Now, as we started building more strategies in that business, strategic tangents started forming. And one of those tangents that really took off and we found momentum and depth in happened to be chocolate. So that's kind of how why we got into chocolate.
It makes sense, but I think I want to understand a lot about why chocolate. So out of all these decisions, maybe everything that you were experimenting with, I'm sure something worked in chocolate, but would love to understand why go deep. I think you've been building Manam for like 4 years now. Why go so deep in chocolate?
Almond House was a mithai brand, and mithai is a very traditional category. And one way to find niche in mithai was to premiumize. And we built a strategy that premiumized, and we built what we call a house of brand strategy in as far as mithai is concerned. So we built these couple of brands that, there's a gelato brand called Indulge, and there was a quick service restaurant brand called Gappe Vappe, where we do gentrified street food. But they all sat under that umbrella. and they satisfied consumer needs of the footfall coming into those stores. By the time we found decent scale in that business, a quarter of that business was gifting, which is occasion-led, festival-led, one-to-one, one-to-many, and corporate gifting. A quarter of it. And we were starting to hear from customers and also starting to identify that, what about chocolate? Because we tried to build this sort of umbrella around these brands, that each of these brands will sit under that Almond House umbrella, but then may eventually find enough push, impetus to find life of their own, budgets of their own, become brands of their own.
Hey, before we go ahead, I need a minute of yours. See, if you're someone in a product, marketing, or business role trying to change the orbits of your career, our Advanced Growth Strategy program is built for you. It's a live 4-week program where you learn how to acquire customers, how to onboard them, drive repeat purchase, and more importantly, you will learn how to monetize your customers at scale. And you will learn all of this through case studies, real-world projects, and alongside a community of 4,000 plus top leaders in India who are our members. The next cohort of our program starts on 29 June, and there's a lot more to unpack here. So you can head to the link in the comments to see the program's curriculum, access free projects built by our members, and the timeline of the program. Awesome. With that, let's continue our conversation with Chaitanya.
But then chocolate took us in a different tangent, because there were some interesting learnings as we started thinking about chocolate. I had no idea. 5 years ago, I have no idea about chocolate, right? Chocolate was something that we bought as an ingredient.
Yeah.
Right? It came in a bag. And we tried to understand who's doing what in chocolate in India. And we created a context around it, a market context of who's doing what in chocolate in India, particularly around what our DNA as a company was, which was premium, retail-led gifting. And we mapped these brands out on price, on range, on various different factors, and we tried to get into what the product is and what the product mix is, because this is about product. It comes down to food.
Yeah.
And we realized that most or everybody who was doing anything in chocolate at that time in India of decent scale and through a business model was buying chocolate. They were buying chocolate from the same 2 or 3 multinational or large Indian industrial companies. More often, it was compound than chocolate. So compound is where you replace the most valuable thing, or what defines chocolate as chocolate, which is the fat, which is cacao butter, with a cheaper, more robust, hydrogenated fat, like a vegetable oil or a palm oil. Technically it is in chocolate, but most of what we were eating and are eating still happens to be compound. We realized that anybody who's doing anything in chocolate was buying the chocolate, molding it, first melting it, molding it, putting their sea salt, putting their nuts, putting it into their packaging, and calling it their chocolate, which didn't feel like a sustainable enough differentiation for me to build a business. Because by this point, I'd realized that, with the shifting consumer needs in urban India, from more traditional categories like mithai to more contemporary, modern, and for some reason, by way of that, Western categories, people, they're going to be, every city is going to have 2 or 3 chocolate brands like we've had mithai brands. And I think you're starting to see that in tier 1 urban markets and to some extent tier 2 markets with pastry, patisserie, right?
Yeah.
And the idea was that if everybody is going to buy the same primary raw material and make the same set of products, it's going to end up becoming a very homogeneous product mix.
Yeah.
very much similar to how mithai has become. You know, so that's around when, this is the pandemic years. This was we were relatively free to think, and there was a lot of communication happening. There was Clubhouse, things like that. That's when we started immersing ourselves into this world of how chocolate is made. How is chocolate made? And this whole nascent global movement of bean to bar or craft chocolate, so small batch chocolate making and all of that. And I felt that this might be something that we can do, but then there was a problem, which is that the barriers to enter that are very low.
Interesting.
It's very easy to make bad chocolate, and that changed when chocolate transitioned from being the dominion of large industrial infrastructure to being able to be made in small quantities, small batches with smaller infrastructure. That's when I started asking, where do the beans come from? Because chocolate is ultimately made from cacao beans, right? And this whole phraseology that you are all so familiar with, which is bean to bar. It's a phraseology that we as a brand don't identify with for various reasons. One is that we don't start with the bean. We start much, much before it becomes a bean. And we don't stop at the bar. It's about the versatility of this ingredient and how it can be expressed or used to create products that are relevant to various different consumer needs and consumer behaviors. So this bean to bar thing is, that led me to ask, where are the beans coming from? And that led into us reaching a cacao farm in West Godavari. And that initiated a 3.5-year exploration amongst cacao farmers, identifying a completely new problem around the agri side of cacao, which stems from the history of how cacao came to India. India is a very small cacao growing country. We grow around 0.5% of the world's cacao. We import more than 70% of our needs. So we identified this problem that came from how cacao came to India. And cacao came to India not very long ago. Came to India in the early 60s, but was brought to India by industrial players for industrial chocolate, right? And at this point, I want to present two worlds to you. Two different markets, two different worlds, two different products, which is industrial chocolate, all the chocolate that we grew up with, that we are so familiar with, and craft chocolate, which we are trying to build and try to make relevant for us as Indians. So industrial chocolate is made with commodity beans, which are bulk commodity cacao. All of the optimization in industrial chocolate is about productivity, right? In industrial chocolate, flavor is not derived so much from the bean. The dependency on the bean on flavor is less. It's largely the fat. And the fat in that bean, which is nearly 50% of its composition, is where the money's at. The value in that value chain is in the fat. Now, the problem that we identified is a genetic problem. Cacao in India is optimized for industrial purposes, right? So they brought plant varietals or cultivars, we call them clonal varietals, that were from a set that are optimized for industrial use. So this is optimization for productivity. So these trees are disease resistant. They have higher fat content in the bean. They have higher yields per acre. But flavor is not in the mix here. It's not spoken about. Because flavor is not so relevant to that process. And to a large part, when we first studied the numbers, we realized that, while we know that India imports a majority of its cacao needs. And India's production itself is disproportionately small to our consumption. But if you look at the rupee value of import and export numbers of cacao, we realize that the rupee value of import and export is more or less the same. But we know that the volume of cacao that we import is much higher. So it tends to lead us to believe that we're importing something less valuable and exporting something more valuable, which is likely the cacao fat, where many companies have operations in other countries where they have laws on how much cacao fat chocolate needs to have, and their requirement of cacao butter would be higher. That's a hypothesis. The problem we identified was that these trees that they brought and these varietals and cultivars that they brought are industrial. So they brought a set of varietals through other industrial nurseries in Malaysia and Philippines, and they brought them to the coconut growing regions of the country. So they brought these varietals that are optimized for their purposes. Now that problem has since been compounded because for the last 70 years, these trees and these plantations have been seed propagated. So even those clonal varietals that were optimized for Indian climate, but with the view of industrial productivity, have since been cross-pollinating for 70 years. So India is unique in the sense that no cacao tree on any Indian cacao farm is similar to the one sitting next to it, because they've all been planted by seed, and what pollinated that seed is a question of, it's almost, I call it a genetic orgy. It's just it's a big mix, which is good for diversity, but there's no way to say that, okay, this farm or this region will have this characteristic flavor profile. So we ended up with this bean, which we found ourselves to be fairly confident of. It was a fine flavor bean. So this is the world. Industrial chocolate is made from commodity bulk cacao. Craft chocolate is made from fine flavor cacao, where the optimization is on flavor and complexity every step of the way, right? This is about sensorial evaluation. This is about you perceiving to see what is interesting in this bean, in this chocolate, and then this confection that you make from this chocolate. And complexity is finding interesting and complex flavors that lend to a pleasurable experience when consuming this chocolate. So we ended up with this bean. And this is when by this point, we had created this sort of mission that we want to create a reputation for Indian cacao. Remember how I said Indian cacao is a very small production. We're only 0.5% of global production. Even if we quadrupled it, we'd only be 2% of global production. It's very unlikely that we're ever going to be a major cacao growing country. But maybe we can be a premium cacao growing country. And that's where our technology kicks in, where we're kind of creating this whole data chain that allows us to make data-driven decisions on the outcome, which is flavor and complexity. We caught ourselves at this point and we reminded ourselves कि भाई हम तो हलवाई थे, हमें chocolate बनाना था, but instead we went on this whole tangential sort of exploration to create a reputation for Indian cacao and get craft chocolate makers and chocolate makers globally to recognize it as an origin and use these beans. What about chocolate? And that's when we came back to the drawing board and we started looking at how we would use these beans to try and build a chocolate brand, specifically a craft chocolate brand, that is relevant to us as Indians. And that's where we built out a product mix strategy, where we built product mix on a couple of paradigms. One is that, this is the second part of that statement, that we are not bean to bar, because we didn't see this as we didn't see bars as being substantially relevant to us as Indians. And this is where our pedagogy as Mithaiwalas kicks in. That chocolate for me, growing up in the 90s, was not so much a bar. It was that Black Forest cake that my parents got for me from the local bakery. That cornetto ice cream that we ate, where you ate the ice cream and the cone, and inside you had that sweet dollop of chocolate. It's these memories and associations that we as Indians already have with chocolate, with this ingredient, but that's kind of used in its, used to leverage its versatility. And we created a product mix of 300 products spread over 50 different categories. And that's our hangover from being Mithaiwalas, which is that, the two paradigms that we built product mix on were, one is self-indulgence and gifting, right? Self-indulgence is, of course, our desire to indulge. But gifting plays on our social proclivity as Indians to gift, share, and consume sweet things, which we've done for decades, if not centuries. The second paradigm we put a layer of on this product mix strategy is chocolate as a product and chocolate as an ingredient. Chocolate as a product was for us chocolate, which ended up being bonbons, truffles, nama, janduya, tablets, which is what we call our bars, barks, clusters, and chocolate as an ingredient, which are cakes, pastries, macarons, muffins, cupcakes, venouserie, which is croissants, and ice cream, gelato, soft serve, beverage. Chocolate as a beverage is a very important category for us that we're building. So these two paradigms kind of came together, and we built this range of products that it has to be the expression of this product in so many different ways that get consumed for various different needs at different times in the day, different times in the week, different times in the year. Right? All anchoring around our ultimate sort of positioning and the ultimate business that we're trying to build, which is a gifting business. So that's how it came about. We built product and then we launched it through a retail location. And we see ourselves as in this phase of the brand's life, as a multi-format retail brand. That, of course, leverages other revenue streams and other channels such as D2C commerce and quick commerce and all of that. But here we are in the stage of building aspiration to consume great chocolate and consume it in ways that is relevant for us as Indians without being reductionist of our own self-conception of ourselves as Indians into kesar, ilaichi, badam.
Perfect, yes.
That for us, India is not chocolate samosa, chocolate rasgulla. The tier 1 urban India, as far as tier 1 urban India is concerned, we're now well-traveled. We're aspirational. And we are desirous of discovering these products and experiences that we can call our own. And we launched it through this first retail location, which is our first retail model, which is the Manam Chocolate Karkhana in Hyderabad. And this is this 10,000 square foot hyper-experiential location where we not only sell product, but we tell stories. And all of that with chocolate being converted into various products. So we tell 3 stories here. And the 3 stories are farm to bean, which is the work that we're doing with the Indian cacao farmer, the work that we're doing with Indian cacao, the post-harvest processing, and how it becomes this bean. Bean to chocolate, where we make about, I think, 38 different base couvertures, which is chocolate. And then chocolate to confection, where my colleagues take these 38 different chocolates and make these 300 products. And while that is laid out, people can see this happening around them. And that's truly our actual production center. All of our products for the next year and a half or 2 years at least come from there.
I know. So this is a question actually. So the Times, I think, listed you on the places to visit in their global list. The Karkhana on the outside looks extremely fascinating because we've been nerds and researching a lot about how have you built it. We've seen a lot of videos. We wanted to visit. But why the chocolate brand building an experiential experience like the Karkhana? Like, what was the thought process behind it? And why build that into, it has a cafe, it has a tour, you give classes, and the production happens there. What's the story behind it?
One is that this is us creating positioning, us trying to break this notion that craft can't have scale. Craft chocolate is usually very artisanal,
Yes.
which is a word that is often bastardized in various different contexts, but which means that it's to artistic, creative exploration, one or two people making product in a small way. And then there's this whole world of fine premium luxury, which is almost always industrial players buying industrial chocolate, making product, packaging it in an elevated manner, selling it through an elevated experience. Our question is, why can't craft have scale? And why can't we find a meeting point between these two worlds? And we felt that there's no place to do this but for India, because we have that perfect storm of consumers who want to discover something new and want to own it, and on the other want to premiumize and want to consume something that is premium and good.
Yeah.
These came from exercises to create that aspiration around the brand. You know, this is a larger than life world. It's layered and complex and has depth, so that, you know, it isn't purely commercial in that sense. It's where creative meets commercial.
Chaitanya, coming to, you are India's first level 3 certified chocolate taster. What does that mean?
Basically, this is a certification in learning how to taste chocolate, which is to kind of begin your sensorial journey into how to taste chocolate, but really taste anything. That how can we mindfully appreciate chocolate and understand what are the nuances, what is good about it, and what is bad about it. And it's a science as well as an art where you start sort of creating this set of archetypes in your mind for you to be able to clearly articulate what you're tasting. That's really what it is.
I think, Chaitanya, growing up, I think all of us will relate to this, which is we've always heard of Swiss chocolate being the best in the world, a perception created around Swiss being the best chocolate. Brands like Toblerone come to mind. How did that happen? How did Swiss chocolate become the best chocolate in the world?
So it's Swiss and Belgian
Yes.
and Europe in general. You know, we have to understand the history of cacao and chocolate. You know, the human history of interaction with this plant goes back to about 5,600 years. Cacao is indigenous to the upper Amazon cloud forest, which is what would be present-day Peru, Bolivia. This plant has been through a lot before it became that bar of Swiss chocolate. And it's 5,000 years of human history. It had to cross the longest mountain chain in the world, which is the Andes, and that could have only been done by humans. Then it got imported into this Central American, Mesoamerican culture, which we so often associate with chocolate. It is said that Montezuma only consumed cacao.
Wow.
But chocolate as we know it in its solid, sweetened form is less than 200 years old.
Wow.
Right? Chocolate for most of this 5,600 years has been a beverage, including after it arrived in Europe.
Wow. And what is that history? Was it hot chocolate before? How was it consumed?
The initial consumption of cacao in South America was as a green, fresh beverage. But largely what we know is that it becomes this super relevant plant culturally, socially, spiritually for this Mesoamerican culture. right? It becomes part of their sacrificial ceremonies.
Wow.
This is a civilization that didn't have any other native stimulant of their own. So this was the primary stimulant. They dyed it with this deep red annatto seed. It kind of looked like blood. They said that it was spiced and it was sweetened with probably something like agave, and they made this beverage that has this froth on it, kind of like our filter coffee sort of a froth. And this beverage is, it's spiritually relevant for them. When Europeans arrived, I think it was Christopher Columbus's 4th expedition to South America that they discovered cacao.
Okay.
I read somewhere that, and it's in true colonialist fashion, they wrote it off as something fit for the pigs.
Wow.
Right? But as the Europeans started settling in, they started taking women and started, culturally integrating, they start taking a liking to it. And cacao arrives in Europe, I think it's 1585 to the Spanish courts.
Okay.
This is actually very relevant because it quickly catches fire and cacao becomes very popular as a beverage all across Europe. So it moves from royal family to court to court to court. And
this is as a dessert or?
This is as a beverage. And the important thing to note here is that this is the first time cacao is cut with something to make it more palatable to European palate, which is sugar, which is another very important colony crop. Now, in Europe, like everything else, as the aristocrats and the noble consume it, there is an aspiration in the masses to consume it. And it starts creating this demand. They're called coffee houses that kind of sprout up all across Europe. It's also kind of parallelly to the temperance movement, where alcohol is kind of being not favored.
Okay.
This becomes a beverage of choice. It becomes a stimulant of choice. But, the point here is that this is the first time it gets cut with sugar.
It gets cut with sugar as in?
Which is that this is the journey and story of how this bean has devolved into what we consume it now, which is likely a very far cry from how Montezuma consumed it. And which it's diluted, right, with sugar to make it more palatable. Now, as demand for cacao grows in Europe, there's a need to increase production. So cacao starts moving to other colonies, right? It moves first to the Caribbean, then to West Africa, and very recently to Asia, etc. Another interesting thing to note is that cacao is one of those sort of produce that it was used as currency, not as barter, but the bean was currency. So this was another way to kind of print more money, right? So this starts this journey of this deep, inseparable connection between cacao, colonialism, slavery, and all of these darker notions that we associate with chocolate.
Wow.
Right? Because of this European demand for chocolate. So cacao became chocolate because of Europeans. And that kind of brings us to this question that you asked as to why are we so fascinated about European chocolate. The way I look at it, chocolate was always something that is grown in a colony and consumed by the colonizer at home.
Wow.
And it's a series of inventions and sort of movements with this ingredient that make it what we know chocolate as today. And all of that happened in Europe. Now, why do we associate Switzerland with chocolate? Henry Nestle invented milk flour, which is milk powder, which was a turning point in human nutrition, right? And this was about infant mortality and finding nutrition for infants.
Yes.
It only took 20 years from when Henry Nestle invented milk powder for Daniel Peter, who was a Swiss chocolatier, to make the first milk chocolate.
Wow.
And we associate Switzerland with milk chocolate because Switzerland has really good milk, and milk powder evolved out of Switzerland. But milk powder was a great invention for human nutrition, but it was also a great way to cover up the off notes and defects of now colony grown cacao. So as cacao moved colony to colony, it also genetically changed, right? There was a lot of crossbreeding. It would also have been bred for different climates. There would have been a lot of selection over these few hundred years. And the flavor, the nature, the sensorial perception of the bean also changed. So it's first cut with sugar, then it's cut with milk powder. And the reason I use the word cut is I kind of associate it to cutting a street drug. We've been devolving this, one at a consumption level with things that we mix with it. Second, at a genetic level, because it's been moving so much and it's been changing so much that it would have become something very different from what was consumed there. Now, this kind of brings you to, when did chocolate become chocolate? It's the invention of the cacao butter press by a gentleman named, I think it's Conrad Van Houten or Casparis Van Houten, one of the two. And Van Houten is a name that you would be familiar with even now. It's a large multinational brand around chocolate and chocolate ingredients. The invention of the cacao butter press allowed for the extraction of the fat from this bean to be able to reformulate it in a higher proportion. And cacao butter is what solidifies to make your bar of chocolate, along with the sugar and other ingredients. So you could now extract the cacao butter and then build it into the formulation with a higher percentage, which means it could solidify easily and last. Now, it's only now when the Europeans needed to travel back to colonies to fight wars, we're talking early 20th century, early 1900s, where, we needed to make chocolate rationable. It needed to travel better in temperate climates. It needed to become cheaper. When they started removing the very thing that makes chocolate, which is the cacao butter, and replacing it with a cheaper, more robust hydrogenated fat like a vegetable oil. And that's the final straw, where it started as this sacred drink that they drank in ceremonies and was an integral part of this society that was highly evolved and ended up becoming oil. And that's kind of why, chocolate and Europe are strongly associated, because also this product was developed for their climates.
Fair, yes.
It was Europe that consumed chocolate, and it is still Europe that consumes chocolate.
And how did this come to India? It's the colonies, India being a colony, was that the reason it came to India?
I don't know when India started consuming chocolate. It can't be very long ago. If you remember when we were growing up, any candy we would call chocolate.
Yeah, yes.
But I think India, it would have been not more than 100 years ago that we've started consuming chocolate. And cacao came to India just 60, 70 years ago.
I think we should, before getting into any of it, we should understand the process of making chocolate, because you've spoken a lot about the cacao butter and the cacao bean. I think it'll help if you can break down the process of how a bar of chocolate is made today. And maybe you can differentiate between between mass production of it and the craft chocolate of it. That'll help.
Chocolate comes from cacao, and cacao comes from this tree called Theobroma cacao, which is the very cliched food of the gods. This tree puts out these fruit that we call pods.
These are like the big pods, the cacao pods.
They're not very big. They are, depending on the origin, the genetics, etc., they would be kind of like a rugby ball at the largest. And each of these fruits has about 40 to 50 different beans on them. And these beans are covered with this mucilage, which is an amazing fruit. It tastes nothing like chocolate. And this mucilage has a lot of sugar in it. Now, this fruit is harvested, that the beans and the pulp are extracted. and they are to be fermented.
Okay.
Right? Now, this is where the sort of divergence happens, where in industrial chocolate, the fermentation is quick. It's keeping in mind industrial outcome. Typically, it's done at a farm level. The farmer harvests these fruits, extracts these beans and pulps, puts them in a bag, leaves the bag lying under a tree for 2 or 3 days. It's expected to ferment. Then they dry it. And once it's dried, it's sent to chocolate making. This is the farm side of things on industrial. And in commodity and bulk cacao, it's a large sort of huge supply chain across. It's a global supply chain. It's a big behemoth of an industry. Now, in craft, what we try to do, and specifically what we at Manam Chocolate or Distinct Origins is trying to do, is to really deep dive into what we can do at that farm level in terms of soil, in terms of genetics, in terms of farming practices to evolve an interesting and complex fruit, which we then take and we ferment through a very evolved 7-day scientific approach.
Okay.
So once you've fermented beans, you dry them, which we do in a very careful way, in a very in a system that we created. Then once the beans are dry, whether industrial or craft, they go into chocolate making. Largely the steps are the same, but the philosophy is different and the objective is different. So in industrial chocolate, you're taking those beans, you're roasting them in large volumes, you're heavily processing them. You're going to formulate it. Once you start grinding this bean, the fat starts coming out. And for your formulation, you want to add more fat, you'll add more fat. And you'll refine it to a certain particle size. You'll conch it, which is to create an emulsion. What we're trying to do is we take this bean and we roast it. And at Manam Chocolate or any craft chocolate brand, we're trying to everything that we do in each of these following steps is keeping in mind flavor and complexity. How little can we do or what can we do to keep what this bean has to offer in terms of interesting complexity and flavor and lose what we don't want. While we create this balance between astringency, bitterness and acidity. So we roast and we'll roast it in a very specific way, in a very controlled manner. Then we crack and winnow it, which is to break open the skin of the bean and let the bean break up into pieces, which we call nibs.
Yes, correct.
Now, cacao nibs are the starting point of making chocolate. Now the aim is to refine this chocolate. Refining is basically grinding, and we're trying to grind this down to a particle size that you want. Now, every chocolate maker has a different style. And, generally as chocolate makers at Manam Chocolate, our realization is that our familiarity as Indians with chocolate is just as much texture as it is flavor. It's the mouth feel. Because for us, we grew up with industrial chocolate. We love a really smooth, velvety chocolate. So we refine to a particular particle size that's about 20 micron. The human tongue can't tell below 20 micron in particle size.
Okay.
Now, as you're refining this, the fat starts coming out. Now, you have this mixture of cacao solids and cacao fat. Now, our aim is to suspend each of these particles evenly in that fat. Right? Get a nice coating of cacao fat around each of these particles, which then we do that mechanically, which is called conching, where we mechanically agitate this to get that suspension down. But also while we're doing that, we're trying to release volatiles that we don't want, try to create balance in flavor and complexity. You end up with chocolate, which a chocolatier, and there's a difference between a chocolate maker and a chocolatier.
Interesting.
A chocolate maker makes chocolate from the bean. A chocolatier makes confection from chocolate.
So using chocolate as an ingredient versus using chocolate as the main, making chocolate as the main product.
So it's about either converting that bean into chocolate, which calls for a chocolate maker, but converting that chocolate into a product, which calls for a chocolatier. So you end up with chocolate at this point, and you do what you want. You bake a cake with it, or you make a bar with it, and then it's very technical.
So I was basically saying, like from a layman's perspective, what changes is essentially when chocolate is being made for industry, they don't really care for the actual source of it, and they use it just as mass production for being made into like thousands and millions of chocolate bars. What happens in the craft space is you actually care about the complexity of the bean, the personality that the bean brings in. Is that correct?
Yes, this would be a good time to go into how to read a chocolate label.
Oh, okay, let's do. What will we do here? We'll dissect a chocolate label.
Let's take a industrial bar.
This is a Bonville.
And we'll take a craft bar if you have one. Usually you see a percentage on chocolate, right? What does that percentage mean? Let's say it says 70%, right? It will be followed by the word dark or followed by the word milk.
Yes.
70% dark implies that 70% of this chocolate comes from the cacao bean, right? It's either cacao solids or cacao fat. In any proportion, by the way, which is an interesting thing to note because cacao solids are, less than 5% the cost of cacao fat.
Interesting.
Convention says that for anything to be dark chocolate, it should be at least 60% cacao content. Right? Now, 70% dark implies that 70% is cacao content and 30% is sugar.
Got it.
45% milk, for instance, implies that 45% of this is cacao content and 55% is non-cacao content, sugar, milk solids, vanilla, etc. For something to be a dark chocolate, it should have at least 60% cacao content conventionally. And it should not have milk solids. So how do you read a chocolate label and how do you differentiate between an industrially produced bar and a craft chocolate bar? Primarily because these days even industrial chocolate is starting to use craft language, whereas I call it craft washing. It's pretending to be a craft bar because people are interested in what they're eating, right? So let's read this. So this says 70% dark and it says intense, but it has a little hash mark that's difficult to see. You'll have to shine it to see. And this hash mark, we'll have to search really hard as to what that means. So this implies that 70% of this is cacao content.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
But we don't see anything about where this cacao comes from. Right? There is no provenance, there is no origin, which implies that, it's not traceable. Right? It comes from bulk commodity cacao. Most likely from Ivory Coast and Ghana, which produce 60% of the world's cacao. Let's take this bar. This is a 60% dark, right? And it says single origin Indian cacao made with cacao from West Godavari district, Andhra Pradesh, Republic of India. Right? Now, one thing is that it indicates very specifically where it comes from, which is one district. In fact, I have a bar here that's a single farm bar. This is our farm tablet. All the cacao in this bar comes from one farm, right? And the farmer's name is printed here. So this is hyper traceable. Now,
and that's important because?
It's important because one, it indicates to you as a consumer that whoever made this chocolate was very specific about where he sourced these beans from, he or she. Took a lot of care to find a very specific location, geography or farm to make chocolate from because it probably has something of value to add to that chocolate.
Correct.
So there's been a lot of care and effort been put into sourcing this bean.
Yeah.
Right? Now, this 60% dark is actually sweetened with jaggery and not sugar. Right? Now, let's read the ingredients.
Yes.
So this 70% dark is first ingredient is cocoa butter, which is 42%, and cocoa solids, which is 31%, which actually makes for 73. But it has then sugar and then milk solids. So this isn't even a dark chocolate
Okay.
because it has milk solids.
Oh.
But it's positioned as a dark chocolate.
So if you have milk solids, it cannot be dark.
In the craft world, we would not accept that as a dark chocolate because this would become a milk chocolate.
Makes sense. Very interesting. Got it. Very cool stuff.
Generally, in the craft world, everywhere, craft and specialty tend to take a very elitist stance, right?
Yeah.
We look down upon industrial chocolate and the brands that we grew up with. I don't. One thing is that I think
They build the market.
we owe them a lot. No, they introduced us to chocolate,
Of course.
right? And for me as a kid who grew up in the 90s, Dairy Milk was my chocolate.
Yeah.
Right? It was my chocolate. And it's this super sweet, super smooth, velvety, what I like to call chocolatey chocolate, right?
Yes.
And that's my association with chocolate. And as a brand or any brand, it's an uphill battle, and it's also not a winnable battle to hold a consumer by the neck and say, what you like is not good. You need to elevate yourself to enjoy what I make. Get yourself educated.
Yeah.
I find that to be a very high horse approach, and that's not the way. I like what I like. You can't distance me from what I like. I just happen to like it. Whether it's good or bad, I like it.
I think coming to this question of why has India always been dominated by these foreign chocolate brands? So even if you look at any chocolate brand that's famous today, so take Dairy Milk, Hershey's, Toblerone, Lindt, Mars, all of them are foreign brands that have come to India. Why have we not seen like an Indian brand breaking through and becoming this global player?
Let's look at chocolate as a market, right? And let's also look at it from a timeline perspective. Chocolate itself is very recent. It's only 200 years old, right? In this form, sweetened and solid, maybe 250 at best. It can't be older than 100 years in India, right? And cultural relevance for chocolate in India has only been building in the last 50 or 60 years. We have our own very dominant, very strong, sweet category, mithai, and that is very regional, that's culturally integrated, that's also integrated into our homes. Chocolate is a recent advent in the larger scheme of things. So it's very, very early days.
Yeah.
Take craft chocolate. It's extremely nascent globally. The whole movement started less than 15, 20 years ago.
Wow.
Right? They're all put together, there would be a few hundred craft chocolate brands globally. It's a small community. And that's one of the things that makes it really exciting for us as a brand coming out of India, is that unlike specialty coffee or wine or gin or single malt whiskey or any craft movement, where the movement happened elsewhere in the world, and we got a chance to catch up, copy, or start creating an interpretation for ourselves much after the nascency of the craft chocolate movement globally is really exciting because we have a chance to lead. We're running parallel. And it grows here, that we can own it. So that's what makes it really exciting. But what's important to answer your question is, chocolate is recent and chocolate is European, right? And then American. It is Western in that sense. It's only started coming to India recently in the larger timeline of things. But it's important to break down what the chocolate market is in India.
Yeah.
Chocolate in India is somewhere around 18,000 crores as a market.
Okay.
13,000 crores in that 18,000 crores is bulk, mass-produced, FMCG, mass chocolate. Your supermarket, your GT, MT.
That's general trade, modern trade.
About 5,000 crores in the balance is composed of nearly 4,500 crores of imported chocolate,
Wow.
right?
So these are brands like,
all the brands that you had mentioned. This is chocolate imported and sold on European Association.
Yes.
Leveraging our fascination with consuming imported things. So 4,500 crores are imported chocolate. Now about 500 crores of what is left is broken down to, these are our numbers that we've kind of pieced together. They may be accurate, they may be inaccurate, but mota muti. About 400 crores is what I call retailers of chocolate, right? So it's either brands that are buying couverture that is imported.
What's couverture?
Couverture is base chocolate that is bought, melted and then molded into product or then used in baking, etc. But it's high quality real chocolate, industrial, right? So Belgian, quote unquote, Belgian chocolate. You walk into a 5-star hotel, the chef there is buying chocolate in a bag from a company that sells it to him as Belgian chocolate, right? Or there are then aggregators of said imported chocolate sold in retail formats. You have all these brands in a chocolate shop. You see them at airports, etc.
Yes.
And they're sold in an elevated retail format, in a giftable format, etc. About 100 crores is what I estimate this whole craft chocolate market globally, in India to be overall. And we're already 20% of that, will be 40% of that next year, or 50% of it. So it's very, very, very early days. Right? First of all, chocolate is recent. Making chocolate is even more recent, right? And India is just turning that corner. And we are a value economy. So we are, for a long time, it's going to be that way. So I also don't think any major attempts have been made to break into chocolate. We now see brands breaking into chocolate. We also see brands breaking into chocolate on the value side, on distribution, which is interesting.
I think the next question, Chaitanya, which is interesting on a user level, which is Indians consume about 200 grams of chocolate a year. That is.
Yeah, I think the number is somewhere around 200 or 300 grams of chocolate per capita per annum.
Per capita per annum.
Yeah.
Compared to a country like Switzerland, where it's about 8 kilos of chocolate a year. What have you understood on that user behavior? Do you see that gap being filled, or is it completely, or should we look at it in a different way?
So I look at it two ways. One is that the cultural relevance of chocolate for India has been packaged product and children. It's only now that we are evolving into consuming chocolate. So there's a huge headroom to grow.
Yes.
Right? And that's exciting. The other is that, for them, it's a centuries-old tradition. And that's one of their primary indulgent ingredients. So we have a lot of competition here, right? We have our own traditional products and categories that dominate. There's a long way to go, but just this size of our market kind of makes it still exciting. A niche in India is pretty large.
Interesting. Cool. I think coming to Whole Truth. So why do you think all of these brands are getting into chocolate now? So we've seen Whole Truth getting into it, and they have a play around, again, dark chocolate, great ingredients, their whole brand play on just quality. You have a slightly massy brand like Amul getting into it, which they have a big catalog of chocolates. They have bitter, they have dark, they have milk and all of that. What's happening in this space? Why are so many brands getting into it?
So I think Amul's been in chocolate for a while now, and that is a mass market distribution-led model. So that's a different market. There is money to be made in chocolate because Indians are consuming chocolate. It's an 18,000 crore market. Why wouldn't Amul try and take a piece of that? Now, other brands like Whole Truth that you mentioned, I think it's a very, very interesting sort of story about how they are a product and quality-led brand, and they have trust and relevance as they started on the whole healthy snacking range. So why shouldn't they take on this part of the market, which is carefully sourced, carefully formulated, sweetened with an alternative sweetener? That's their play.
So Amul, would you say, operates in this 13,000 crore wala segment?
Yes,
And
squarely.
makes sense. And Whole Truth would operate in this 100 crore-ish
Yes,
segment?
I think so. But then there's complexity here, right? These are not clear chocolate. So there's health foods, there's snacking, and
I thought chocolate in the bar form primarily. It could be.
I would also say that they have a product level innovation. So they sweeten with dates, right? Which is plays on their consumer need of consuming less sugar, being more healthy.
For sure.
So we can't look at these segmentations unidimensionally. There are multiple segmentations happening at the same time. So and that's where you find value, right? When you find your own sort of segmentation that intersects between two. For us, it's chocolate and gifting.
Fair. Makes sense. I think we'll come to that. So gifting is very interesting. But I think sticking slightly to Amul, in our heads, when Amul gets into a newish category, it feels like it's ripe for disruption. Recently, they've gotten into protein.
Yeah.
And the way Indians are adopting protein, I think our founder tweeted saying ki protein for food has become AI for SaaS. The way SaaS uses AI everywhere, Indian food brands are using protein everywhere. Everything needs to have protein today.
Yeah.
So the question is, if you see the Amul range, they have 99% bitter, they have just bitter, they have dark chocolate. Whole Truth has gotten into dark chocolate primarily. This is a behavior that I have seen in myself, and I'm sure a lot of people will relate, which is I am consuming more dark chocolate just because I don't want to consume as much sugar anymore. Is this a trend that you're seeing happening? Are Indians consuming more dark chocolate?
I would say that Indians are more specific about what they're consuming and preferences vary. When we grew up, we didn't know percentage. For us, it was just sweet.
Yes.
I think kids today are very specific about what they're consuming, and even adults, that they want to know what percentage it is, they want to know what provenance, what origin it is, etc. So yes, I think to a large extent, there is relatively more consumption of dark chocolate than before. But I also think there's a problem with that because our association so far as Indians with dark chocolate has been mass-produced, industrially produced dark chocolate made from really low-quality beans.
Yeah.
Right? And we have this association that it's very bitter, it's acrid, it's difficult to eat, it's more like medicine. Or it's a sort of fitness chest thumping that I eat only. I manage to eat a dark chocolate, but that's because we haven't had good dark chocolate yet. We're just starting to now. For example, at Manam Chocolate, we make 100% dark.
I know, I've ordered that.
And this is a single ingredient chocolate. It's made with only the bean, and it's a true reflection of what that bean has to offer.
Correct.
And that's a very difficult chocolate to make. But it isn't as acrid as you would think, and it isn't as acrid as a 70 or 80% dark that you would have from an industrial brand.
Acrid just means bitter?
It means strong, right? Yeah. It could be acridity in acidity.
Yeah, like my sister loves dark chocolate, my mom hates it, so makes sense.
Yeah, I think, but we're changing. It's very easy to get used to good quality, and as good quality products start coming into the market, people will, our palates are changing. Our palates change.
Chaitanya, imagine for a consumer, you have a 50 rupee dairy milk, you have like a 400 rupee Manam, and you have like a 500 rupee Lint. First of all, why are they priced differently? And what's happening in these three bars? And why should a consumer care with these three different prices of a similar weight of chocolate, essentially?
This is a good question. The 50 rupee chocolate is likely a milk chocolate.
Yes.
It has a lot of sugar in it. It has a lot of milk solids in it. And the cacao content will be relatively less. It's mass produced. It has economies of scale. It's industrially produced from bulk commodity beans. So is, by the way, your 400-500 rupee industrial chocolate that is imported. But it's expensive because there's an import duty on chocolate. There's a 30% import duty that's levied on chocolate. And it's expensive because you'll pay more because it's imported. It's this fascination with imported chocolate that, you'll pay a premium for. Whereas it's just as industrial as the 50 rupee chocolate. Now, the 400 rupees you're paying for a Manam Chocolate tablet, a lot of that is because of the ingredient cost. Now, let's break down. In industrial commodity cacao, profit pooling is about 80% to manufacturer and retailer. Let's talk about the cacao supply chain, right? From the time that it is harvested to the time that it is a bar, 80% of profit that is generated is pooled towards manufacturer of chocolate and retailer of chocolate. About, I think, somewhere between 8 to 10% is pooled to trader.
So the trader is the person who takes it from the farm to the...
Correct. To the industrial company that's converting that bean into chocolate.
Okay.
And only between 6 to 10% is pooled towards the farmer.
Okay.
And this has been historical. In craft chocolate, particularly in our model, we pool about 25 to 30% to the farmer.
Okay.
This is because of the procurement model that we've developed that is, markedly different from other industrial chocolate, but also craft chocolate. Everybody starts by buying beans. We start by procuring fruit. Right? We process that fruit, we make that bean, and then we make chocolate from that bean. Now, one part of that is that there's a larger pooling to the farm gate. It's also likely that the bar that you're buying, depending on the bar that you're buying, depending on how dark it is, has a lot more cacao fat than an industrially produced imported chocolate. Because the percentage, remember, it could be any proportion of cacao solid and cacao fat.
Correct.
Right? So this is a high fat, this is a good fat chocolate.
Yes.
Right? And the second is that it's not industrially produced. It's produced in small batches. It's carefully sourced. They're very expensive ingredients used. It doesn't have the economy of scale that an industrially produced bar has, which produces in tons per day, right? Or which the factories from which it come from produce in tons per day. And of course, then there is all of the other aspects of supply chain, proximity to origin, each of those qualitative factors. The problem here is that we're just about turning the corner as consumers to, one, of course, to want and desire high quality products coming from India that we can proudly claim as our own. At the same time, we're still yet to cross this barrier that India hai to sasta hona chahiye. Why is it priced similar to an imported bar? It's this automatic notional value that we impose on anything imported, that it must be better. And this is a hangover from colonialism that we continue to carry for several generations, and I think will happen for some time. But today, it's changing in every category, right? Take it any consumer category, from apparel to food to luggage.
Indian brands are coming through. Like, are there any favorite Indian brand stories that you love?
The Whole Truth is one of them. These are brands that we are building for ourselves, and it's this new sense of identity that we've been starting to create, that we are capable of creating product for ourselves. So we like to say, by Indians, for India, but also for the world. So we have aspirations to position this as chocolate from India and encourage the world to look at it the way we look at Belgian or Swiss that cacao grows here. It doesn't grow in Europe. And we are making chocolate the way we like it, in our style as Indians. And we also creating products that are relevant to us as Indians, but also positioning it to the world that, India has value now. It's not necessarily something that has a lower perceived value. And I think it's a long play, and it's going to be done across categories, across brands, across businesses, and it's going to happen over the next 10, 15 years. But we have our consumption window ahead of us in the country, and that consumption window is going to drive a lot of growth across these brands.
I think the question is, Chaitanya, that there are two consumers. One is a person who's happy with the Cadbury they're consuming, and the other is looking for more craft experiences like Manam. The question is, does a normal consumer care about, hey, do I care where my chocolate is coming from? Do I care where my cocoa bean is coming from? What have you understood there? I'm sure there are two segments that you've pointed out. And I'm sure one is a growing segment. But what has been your understanding? Does a user care enough today?
So as a brand, I'll tell you what our stance is, which is that craft is our philosophy. But as a brand, I am not foolish enough to think that that's primarily why people make purchase decisions. And we've created our product mix and our strategy around what are these consumer decisions and what influences them.
Yeah.
For instance, one of them is the 60-year-old at home and the 60-year-old at home should enjoy this for what it is and not what I say it is. Right? Ki haan, ye chocolate hai aur maza aaya. It's about products and consumer behaviors that are relevant to us as Indians, which is why we are a gifting brand. This is us building on our understanding of our social proclivity as Indians to gift, share, and consume sweet things. That's the line, right? And this is about, how when we were kids, going to somebody's house, carrying a box of mithai was an everyday thing. It isn't anymore. And how do we tap into that consumer behavior? And all of the craft, all of the complexity, all of the provenance, the origin is there for those who are interested. But fundamentally, at Manam Chocolate, we are product people. I can have a great story and I can tell it really well. But if my product isn't there yet, I'm not going anywhere. And on the flip side, I may not be able to tell a great story or, I may not have a story, but if my product is strong, I'm still going to thrive. Fundamentally, we believe that we are product people and it's the product that speaks. Everything else is a supporting structure, scaffolding that helps bring depth, right? It helps carry the product to market.
Do you think craft as a category is becoming, as it stands today, do you think it's more of a signal piece, which is, for example, take Bangalore as an example, when Subco opened here with the positioning of, hey, craft coffee, or a recent ice cream brand, Lick, craft ice cream, you'll see people going like sheep, lines of people to try a cup of coffee or lines of people to try a scoop of ice cream. In our heads, it creates like a difference between these two categories of people that, hey, there is this category of people who love craft. So these are connoisseurs of taste and they'll go there because they have high taste versus this other persona, which is, hey, I don't care about craft or anything. I just wanted to taste nice. Do you think this craft bucket is becoming more of like a signal piece where people want to stand out, they want to come across as different today? Is that a thing that you're seeing?
I think we underestimate consumers. Consumers are very intelligent. They can sense authenticity and they will adjudicate based on that authenticity. Because like I mentioned, there's a lot of craft washing in industrial product. Mass market products are also assimilating this new language. We were talking about how I was at this coffee shop, it's multinational coffee shop, that's also starting to have this language. But I don't think, consumers are fools. Consumers, ultimately in India, we are ruthless on product. The ice cream at Lick must be damn good. That's why people are lining up. Everybody is going to have a go at it, but people will see through. And it doesn't matter. It comes down to product is my philosophy.
Chaitanya, your website has something that's very interesting. I've not seen it in any other brand, at least today, which is if you go to the Manam website, you'll see awards given to each tablet. So you have won a gold award from the Academy of Chocolate. I have two questions. First of all, what is this Academy of Chocolate? Second is, what goes into making this best chocolate in the world?
So there are several awards for chocolate, and these are craft awards. And chocolate is awarded based on sensorial flavor outcome. How does it taste? What are interesting flavor profiles? What is complexity in this chocolate? And is it a well-balanced good chocolate? And the awards are given out based on that.
Got it. And how many people are competing in general for like an award?
They get entries from across the world, mostly craft brands, and they have panels and they have judges, and it's a whole production around it. For us, it's more validation that yes, we can make a global standard product from India, and this is not a goal to reach. These are just checkpoints to kind of keep getting realigned to a global standard that is also dynamic. The standard itself is shifting. Consumer preferences are shifting. It is important, but it is not that important. Fundamentally, what is important is that does your consumer enjoy this product? Is he coming back? And is he buying it for the reasons you want him to buy it? For us, real validation for me came, I think about 15 days after go-to-market.
Okay.
Standing on the shop floor at the Karkhana, family walked in and they ordered 150 boxes of 12 pieces of pallets to announce their poti's birth. And that's the business that we are trying to build. To make chocolate culturally relevant to us as Indians in the form of self-indulgence, but also in the form of gifting.
I think before we get into Manam now, I think before we get to it, I just had a final question on like the big daddy of chocolate in India. So basic research tells you that dairy milk controls about 50-60% of the market share in the massy chocolate category. For the longest time, chocolate has meant dairy milk for Indians. So we've seen people going to a shop and saying dairy milk de do for any chocolate. So dairy milk created this amazing thing for itself where it became just synonymous with chocolate in India. They came a while back, but they are still relevant. What do you think dairy milk has cracked in India?
Isn't that like what every brand aspires to do, to become synonymous with the category itself?
Yes.
For me also, and for most of us, dairy milk was the chocolate. And I think for one, it's our association with this confection, which is sweet, has these malty notes, it's smooth and velvety. One is that it's that palate level association with what chocolate for us was. We'd eat it even if it was melted.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think it's decades of building brand, building distribution, and also it's at a segment, it's at a price point where chocolate is approachable. It's accessible. For so many of us, we grew up on this. So it's so relevant for us. as Indians, and I think it will continue to be relevant for a long time.
Yeah.
Because who can take away from us what we like?
And so many stories attached to this. I mean, so price point and the distribution of it makes complete sense. Like I remember as a kid, when I came back from school, my routine was this, that I would get down from an auto, I would go to this small shop which always had dairy milk. It went from being a 10 rupee bar to a 20 rupee bar as I went through school. But that was my routine. I would get down from the auto and I would buy a chocolate, 10 rupee pocket money that I had.
Yeah.
I would buy that dairy milk and then go back home.
Yeah.
So what was it? Was it definitely the price point that, as you said, made it extremely accessible? And also being at the right place at the right time with the distribution of it. Like the smallest of the shops carried a dairy milk.
Yeah. It was, for me, it was the tuck shop at boarding school. It is affordable. And the second is that it's everywhere, like you said, but it's also in a form that we like. It's milky and sweet, and it's things that we grew up with, but also things that we've historically liked, which is dairy and sweetness, and it's a mithai.
So Chaitanya, for anyone who doesn't know anything about Manam, let's get into what is Manam and what are you all trying to build?
Manam Chocolate is an Indian craft chocolate brand. We're trying to build the category of craft chocolate for India, primarily urban, tier 1 India, in culturally relevant ways that satisfy consumer needs for us as Indians in the premium space. We have a whole agri side to our business where we work with over 150 farmers, now spread over nearly about 3,000 acres of cacao in West Godavari. We work with farmers, we procure fruit, we process this fruit into a fine flavor cacao bean, which under distinct origins, which is the sister concern, we also export to chocolate makers globally. And we take that bean and we make 300 products spread over 50 different categories as we try to evolve a retail first business, primarily around interpreting chocolate for India as an indulgence, but also as something that we gift. And over the next few years, you'll start seeing us as a gifting brand, but also as an indulgence brand. We're about to launch a beverage model, which is chocolate-based beverages, leaning on baked goods and gelato. You'll see us in multiple cities. You'll see us online already to become this premium chocolate brand for India.
So we have 6 pieces of chocolate. We have ranged it from the cheapest to the most expensive one. We want you to taste each and give us like your opinion on what do you think of the quality for each. We'll do like a fun exercise.
So I can see here that there is milk chocolate. Visibly, I can tell that this has milk in it. And there's dark chocolate. There's chocolate with inclusions, which is nuts. And there's plain chocolate. What's interesting to see is this. This is called blooming. And you go to the supermarket and you'll find sometimes chocolate that has this sort of a discoloration or a whitish layer. And sometimes it's powdery to taste.
Yes.
That's because the temper has broken.
Okay.
And tempering in chocolate is to use the fat and create a crystalline structure along with sugar, which we call beta-5 crystals.
Okay.
And this structure, it's basically crystallization. You're crystallizing it to form, as it solidifies, it solidifies in that crystalline structure. That allows for it to travel better, to melt better, to have a good mouthfeel, etc. Now, when you see this sort of a thing, you can see that this part of the chocolate has discolored. Sometimes you'll see a whitish layer. This is a bloom. And bloom is when the chocolate has, in the supply chain, been subject to temperature changes. It's because when a chocolate melts and you put it back in the fridge to solidify, it will solidify, but it won't solidify back to the crystalline structure.
Got it.
Right? And that's called the breaking of temper. A good chocolate would be tempered and the temper would have held. Right?
Got it.
So one of the ways to test for temper is you snap it. Okay, this is
Artist.
right. So this is a sort of the temper might have held, but this is not at bar, typical to what you have here. This is more like a Neapolitan or a sort of a square.
Correct, yes.
Right. Okay. Now let me rearrange these. These are milk. This is dark, right? And this has more sugar, so we'll taste this at the end. This also has nuts, so we'll taste this after, right? So let's kind of, so how do you taste chocolate, right? You're going to,
I'll taste it with you. Right. I'll tell you if I get something.
smell it,
Okay.
right? What does it smell like?
Chocolate.
Okay, we'll come to that. This is interesting, right? In craft chocolate, we say melt, don't munch.
Okay.
Okay, chocolate and cacao butter melts at body temperature.
Okay.
This chocolate is very cold. I would have it more at a warmer temperature. I can smell and I can already tell that this is an industrial chocolate. Primarily because what I smell first is vanilla or vanillin. I don't smell chocolate. And this is interesting because our association with chocolate is more often vanilla or its cheaper synthetic version, which is vanillin, and not so much the cocoa itself, right? So when you buy dark chocolate from a craft brand, Manam Chocolate, for instance, in our dark chocolate, we don't use vanilla because that masks all the work that we've done to get complexity from the bean. So this is a masking technique.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Chocolate melts at body temperature, which is a very convenient coincidence. So there's really no need to chew. So what you want to notice is what you're tasting, in what sequence or chronology each of those things is showing up. Actually, this chocolate is very cold, so you wait for it to come to some normal temperature. How they're showing up, right? At what intensities each of those things is showing up. How is it melting? Is it melting quickly, slowly? And what is the finish like once you're done? Is it a long finish? Is it a short finish? This has none of that because this is very clearly a chocolate from off the shelf. And all I can taste is a strong note of coconut.
Exactly. It's coconut.
Yeah, it's coconut. I would say rancid coconut oil, right? Typical of Ivorian cacao, cacao that comes from Ivory Coast, which is bulk commodity cacao. It's got a waxy mouthfeel. And all I can taste is vanillin.
Interesting.
Right? So this is very clearly a mass-produced industrial chocolate loaded with vanilla.
So this was Hershey's.
So this obviously is not a bar. It's very thick and you guys have frozen it.
Yeah.
So you want to have chocolate at like room temperature. So this also has vanilla, which is dominating for me, but it's a very conventional European dark roast, very nutty central flavors. It's premium, expensive, but it's industrial and it's definitely European. What did that taste like for you?
So very bitter. I don't know. Still, I think like coconutty. I don't know why.
Yeah, it is that it is industrial commodity cacao, but it's finer. It's refined better. But it's got vanilla in it, which is a big difference from what we ate before, which I think has vanillin in it. This I can smell. This has not been in the freezer. First of all, this has no vanilla or vanillin. Right? It's melting a lot slower, which means it has a lot of cacao butter. I don't know if you're getting this very strong prune or plum.
Okay.
It will also be interesting for you to see the percentages of each of these later. What you found very bitter, what percentage was it? And what you found not so bitter, but what percentage was it and who it was made by.
The second was definitely the most bitter between all these three.
This is not so bitter.
They're
right?
not so bitter. The first one was, I think this is the least bitter. Then the second one and the first.
This is very central also. It's got a little bit of prune plum, but very nutty, familiar, but dark chocolate. No vanilla. This might be craft chocolate. So this has nuts, okay? So we'll eat this last. This clearly looks like a milk chocolate, but this might be a dark chocolate with nuts.
Yeah, this one's definitely.
So let's try this first. I'll try and avoid the nuts itself. Sorry, I got my hands all over it. It's very cold. So another way to kind of evaluate is the color. And compound, which is not chocolate, will always be very, like almost black. So you go to a local bakery, you'll see the cake will be almost black and not brown.
Yeah.
Right? And it also is a function of how chocolate is roasted, right? So very high roast will make it darker. More craft chocolate will choose to roast less because they have things in that bean that they want to express. And that will be slightly browner, redder.
Yeah. This smells nutty, of course.
This is definitely not industrially produced, but it's not very good either, right? You know, it's got no complexity. It's very flat. It tastes like cardboard.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost coffee-like.
Yeah, and it's very sandy. You know, it's clearly made on a melanger.
Okay.
It's got that nut remnant because there was nut in it. It's very easy to make bad chocolate. This is what it is. This is not industrial chocolate, but it's not good chocolate.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's not very pleasant. It's flat, you see?
Yes, I agree. Whatever I understand.
The previous one, you got some complexity. Yes. There's some song in there. This is just bass, no treble.
Correct.
This is plain, but milk.
Milk, yes.
Milk will only have vanilla, you know, and sweet. This is industrial milk chocolate.
What makes you say that?
It's very smooth. It's got vanilla. It's not. I mean, like, this is childhood chocolate type. It's chocolate.
I'll give you a dairy biscuit.
I'll get trolled for this.
Done, sir. Good? You're good to go? Chalo, let's go. I think, Chaitanya, one thing that I want to talk to you a lot about is the brand that you're building. I think if you go to your website and the imagery that you folks do, the packaging that you have, the videos that you have, the design that you all do. I think if we take like a basic packaging, it comes with like a fridge magnet, which is scenes from your farms, I think in Hyderabad.
Eluru, West Godavari.
West Godavari. And
there are no farms in Hyderabad.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Not cacao anyway.
Got it. And you see your packaging, it has a story, it has a map. Extremely fascinated by the way you have built this. I would love to understand how have you all thought through brand. Imagine if I'm a noob watching it, but I want to build in the chocolate space. Tell me exactly how should I think through brand and what have you done at Manam?
So firstly, I want to preface that I don't think we've built yet. You know, it's present continuous. We're building, and a lot of this stemmed from a sort of document that we prepared much before we even started, or while we were starting, which is what we call a brand intent note.
Okay.
And largely, this is my colleagues who kind of pull this together to create strategy where we talk about business strategy as brand strategy or brand strategy as business strategy. It goes both ways. That, you know, when the category that you want to create doesn't exist, not only do you have to build a brand, but you will also have to build the category strategically. And we built this document with this notion that everything that we do is driven by that, right? Nothing is of a certain color or is called a certain thing because I like it or someone on the team likes it. There's a North Star, which is strategy and comes from that brand intent note. But the way we looked at it is this whole creative expression or creative articulation of brand, which is aesthetic, identity, packaging. It's really the last 0.5% of this entire work, right? It all comes down to product, the strategy that you build, the execution of that strategy, and finally, to satisfy some of those strategic objectives, you will have aesthetic, articulation, identity, and that we held to very strongly.
Can you give us like an example? So when you say like a brand intent note, something that you wrote and the way it's flowed down.
Yeah. So I mean, largely it started from that market context that we created. Who's doing what? Where do they land? What do they charge? Or what is their range? And where do we want to fit in? What gap is there for us?
Yeah.
Then we incorporate our unique business model, which is one that we are makers of the bean. We grow this stuff, right? Yeah. That's our identity.
Yes.
And then we are making chocolate the way we think is relevant for us as Indians. And this is the big question. And it has never been answered. It didn't get answered before we launched. It continues to remain unanswered as to what does Indian mean? And how do you answer that without reducing yourself or reducing ourselves, or stereotyping ourselves as Indians into something?
Yeah.
Like the simple checkbox of what Indian means is something that it cannot be answered. It's complex. So a lot of it has to do with embracing that complexity. So then there's that whole part as to who we think we are and how we want to present ourselves. Then there's pricing. How do we want to price? How do we want to position on price? For instance, for us, our strategy was in the beginning, we're almost accessible. We are not don't think and order. We're not think 3 times and order. We are think, weigh, appropriate value, and then purchase. And a lot of what we're trying to do in this stage of the brand is to create aspiration to consume this brand. That's why we are larger than life. A story and narrative plays a larger role. Our stores are large and they're full of experience. So a couple of things here, for instance, that would come from there is also how we want to display that we are authentically craft. In the sense that everything in this has been a deliberate decision. So everything has a recipe number. Nothing in our store is just chocolate. It's always a percentage, it's always an origin, right? There's a recipe number for this particular product, which is actually, to have one, which is single origin West Godavari cacao bean that is roasted and then panned, which is coated with 43% malted milk chocolate, which is also made from single origin West Godavari beans. Now that 43% malted milk chocolate I make to play on everything that we love, that we grew up with, that is malted, which is Bonvita and Complan. So this displays the balance that we want to strike between familiarity at a palate level with the inventiveness and newness of what all chocolate can be. Right?
Interesting. Yeah.
That ye bhi chocolate ho sakta hai. What all forms chocolate can take. Right? And this product is a good example of that because it's not something you can buy. So the second part of that is also what consumer behavior is this particular product trying to leverage, right? Why is it packaged in a bag? And why is it not packaged in a neat tin in single pieces? Because this is our snacking collection. And I want people to snack on this while they're sitting in front of the TV, right? And it's very deliberate. It's very carefully positioned. Now the language at the back, right? For example, it says here, best enjoyed when shared. It's positioned for sharing and snacking. And all of this derive from that strategic sort of direction that we've laid out for ourselves, which will change every couple of years, which we'll reevaluate and which will change. But yeah, that's the idea that, generally when we're doing things, we tend to fixate and start with name.
Yeah.
So to me, that's a big no. That everything, all of the articulation comes at the very end.
I think, Chaitanya, you have this approach of farm to bar, which is very different, I'm assuming, from competition. Tell me, first of all, what is this approach of this full stack, which is, hey, I just don't take, like you said, beans and make chocolate from it. You go to the very fruit of it. First of all, how is this approach different from the competition? And second, if I'm building in this space, should I take this approach versus should I just buy like a cacao fruit and deploy my chocolate from there?
So the model that we've built is unique, not only because we're craft and we're not industrial, but it's also kind of different in the craft world. There, you'll see, when you go around the market, and you'll see a lot of phraseology around this. You see bean to bar, you see tree to bar, you see farm to bar, shoe to bar, and so on and so on. It's endless, right? But for us, it isn't so much about the story. There is economic model, and there's also a supply chain integration that makes us much more competitive and much more sustainable. So, for instance, and sustainable, I mean from a economic standpoint, right?
How exactly can we break that down?
Yeah, I don't share profit with anybody but farmer. Most brands are buying chocolate, so they have stacked into their cost structure the cost structures and the profitabilities of the people who are procuring that cacao, processing it, then the people who are making chocolate from it, marketing it, and then it comes to you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Second is, I am not subject to the volatility of supply that currently stands in chocolate. I don't know if you've been reading, but the last 2 years have...
Cacao prices have...
Yeah. Not only have prices gone up, but, there's been an overall availability problem.
Correct.
Which we're not subject to.
Correct.
So one is that I don't depend on a supplier to give me my primary raw material. I make my primary raw material. Second, the incentive structure that we created around procurement at the farm gate level really holds us close to these farmers. I don't contract farmers in.
Okay.
They work with me because they make more money. And that is really the innovation here, that procurement model.
How much more are they making?
So let me break that down for you, right? So typically, how does this work? A farmer harvests. He does this crude fermentation that he's been taught, because he's been taught that way to keep the price low. They don't expect more from the farmer, because if he does more, he's going to have to charge more, right? Thereafter the fat. So it doesn't ferment. It's put in a bag, left under a tree for 2 days, then spread over a tarpaulin on the street. The dogs walk on it and the chickens pee on it, and that becomes your chocolate, right?
Perfect.
So the beans are then carried to a buyer, who's like a commodity trader, who is an agent for these large companies that consume these beans. He will typically pick up those beans and forward trade them to these companies, but then pay this farmer in about 30 or 45 days, right? In our model, farmer harvests, he's ready to harvest, he calls us. Our truck reaches the next day in the morning, we load these fruit. There's a digital fruits receipt that is generated based on a pricing model that we've arrived with in agreement with the farmer, right? It derives a price per fruit. The price for the lot is determined at that point. It's shared automatically on WhatsApp with the farmer. The cacao pods reach our fermentary. We ferment them and we dry them and we do all of that. But the money is in the farmer's account within 24 hours. So this is a digital transaction, and a transaction certificate, the bank advice, everything is shared with the farmer within 24 hours on its WhatsApp. So it's extremely transparent and extremely digital. One, it gives the farmer confidence. I save the farmer money. I pull profit better to him in 3 ways. One, I take away his cost. He doesn't have to do anything. I do all the work, right? And I want to do all the work because I want control on quality. I make sure that unripe fruit don't get into harvest. I make sure that into fermentation. I make sure that insect or animal bitten fruit don't get into the chocolate. I'm very specific about how these fruit are harvested, etc. Second is, after taking away his cost, I pay him instantly, right? And I pay him a premium over market rate, right? So I give him 3 benefits. I pay a premium, I take away his cost, and I pay almost instantly. There's no credit for him, right? And that incentivizes him or her to work with me. So one is I have that, and that takes years to build because it's trust, and trust takes years to build. So we have trust with our farmers. The second is that I take those beans and I make chocolate. I make expensive chocolate with a lot of cacao butter that I press ourselves. Most craft chocolate brands don't have the wherewithal to press their own cacao butter. We press our own cacao butter not only from the same origin, but the same lot of beans that the rest of the chocolate is made for. So cacao butter is a fat component of formulation for everybody else. For me, it's a flavor part of the formulation. So my quality is directly impacted. So one is that I have control over supply, and I also, as an outcome of it, I am able to make sure that the farmer is adequately compensated for his work. Now, there are 2 things in this. One is that, in order for something like this to be sustainable, one of the things that we believe that it has to be done at scale. This is not a 1 farmer or 2 farmer story that we do for photos and videos. We work with over 150 farmers now, spread nearly over 3,000 acres of cacao. The second is that it needs to make sure that everybody in the value chain makes money so that it rotates and it remains. So that's the second sort of approach here that gives this solid vertical integration, all the way down to the tree, that not only gives us great amount of control on quality and the product that we want to make, but also gives us the ability to keep the supply consistent. Now, when I, as Distinct Origins, exports these beans, and by the way, this year was the first year that that a large consignment of fine flavor cacao has gone to Switzerland for a Swiss chocolate maker to make chocolate, a single origin chocolate from Indian beans. It's never happened before. When I do that, I not only send the beans to him, I send the data to him. So I have a verifiable way for the chocolate maker in Switzerland to assert to his customer that these beans have been equitably traded and have been purchased from lands that have not been deforested, and where these beans have come from. And they value that, and that value is, built into the price.
I think in the interest of time, Chaitanya, I think I have a final question for you. In the beginning of the conversation, you said we're a gifting brand. That's extremely fascinating. When it comes to chocolate, gifting, the first thought comes to mind is Cadbury celebrations. I think the way they were able to associate Cadbury with celebrations and their Diwali ads and relatives gifting each other a celebration box comes through. Tell me, if I'm a founder who wants to build in this space, should I think through gifting a lot, and how big is gifting for you, and how do you look at gifting today?
I think gifting in India is a huge market. I don't have the specific number right now. We are a culture that gifts, right? And I know this from my times in Mithai. This is one-to-one, one-to-many, as well as corporate gifting. We have different gifting occasions through the year. Come Raksha Bandhan, it's a sibling or friend gift. Come Diwali, which is a huge gifting concentration. There's corporate and household gifting. And there's always a need for a premium alternative, particularly around gifting food in India. And the opportunity that we are chasing is to build that around chocolate in a way that's relevant for us as Indians. Of course, self-indulgence is also gifting. But what gifting takes care of for me is customer acquisition. You send 10 gifts because you bought a car.
Yeah.
Although I don't know why people would celebrate buying a car. But you send 10 gifts because, I don't know, on an occasion. Those 10 receivers of gifts have an opportunity to convert as customers. And this is a snowball effect.
Yeah.
And it's for us, our customer acquisition is through one of our primary consumer behaviors of businesses, which is gifting. Now, having said that, that works if your product is strong. If your product is strong, you'll be able to acquire customers through sales.
Yeah, and I'm assuming when somebody gifts, they are putting their reputation on it, which is, hey, I love this product.
Yeah.
I'm vouching for this while I'm sharing this.
Yeah. So in this context, we're not selling chocolate. We are selling ownability. That, look, I discovered this. This is a reflection of who I think I am. Try it. And it's that confidence that comes when people choose to gift you, and the confidence that comes when you hear from people who have received the gift, that really keeps us going.
Chaitanya, think that I'm a founder who wants to build in this space. What should I think through? What are some obvious pitfalls that is very obvious to you that I should be avoiding, and what should I be looking out for in general?
For us and the way we look at these problems, and a lot of what we've been talking about is, I don't think it's about doing something in a particular space or with a particular product category, but to try and really pinpoint what consumer behaviors are there for you to really capitalize on. And I find that generally as entrepreneurs, we've been encouraged to think that simple is better, right? That the eureka moment comes from something very simple, that people will think, why didn't I think of this before? But our approach and our journey has been that it's complexity in everything that we do that builds moats and also creates differentiation that people tend to be afraid of. For us, for instance, it's working with farmers, building technology to post-harvest. It's building 300 products and not 5 products. It's taking on retail and experiential retail as our primary focus channel. And all of these things, people would choose not to do because it's not the shortest route to building something, right? What I try to remind myself is, what are we trying to build? And always, it's not always that, success is not some unidimensional goal. It's about what is it that you started out wanting to do, what is it that you learned as you're doing, and how did your goalpost shift, of course, but how true to that have you been? Because today, with the infrastructure that I have, I can overnight start producing mass-produced chocolate. I can start seeding general trade and modern trade. But is that what I want to do? No. And I think that these are things that get thrown at us when market is evaluating us, or when you're in discussion to say, how can I get quicker revenue, quicker growth? But how steadfast can you be on your on your original vision as to what is the specific market that you want to target. That may not be a 10,000 crore market, but to remind yourself that you set out to do something, and how true to that can you be?